Thank you so much for connecting to us despite being at the airport. Maybe you can let us know where you are heading now.
Yeah, I look forward. I mean, I'm leaving for the Northern European tour. Not the best season for sure, but I'm so looking forward to being with people in Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Germany if I manage to speak at the public event, if they don't cancel all the public events I have.
I saw that the University of Munich cancelled your talk. Maybe you want to just briefly explain what happened there.
This talk has been planned for a long time. It was organized by the students, and they requested authorization. The university knew that I was going. I mean, I'm a UN special rapporteur, so it shouldn't be controversial. I mean, for some, it might be controversial what I say, but there is nothing controversial about myself. It's very, very shocking that the University of Munich decided to cancel the authorization of the room, alleging security concerns. What are the security concerns? If they are concerned about my protection, they can just do what every country does, ensuring me protection. This reveals, gives an ideological flair to the university that frankly makes people lose respect.
Yes, absolutely. It's very concerning. But we would like to talk to you about the whole situation with Ali Abunimah, which I know that you saw. He was arrested because I saw you also posted something about it.
Ali Abunimah is a journalist of Palestinian descent. He's an American citizen. He was invited to come to speak at a conference in Zurich. He's been mistreated since arrival. So he's been detained without charge and trial. And apparently, the one who ordered his detention, his arrest and detention, is a Swiss official who has strong ties with Israel. This is very dangerous. So I hope that Ali Abunimah and his legal team will continue to follow up with Swiss authorities, because there should be some form of acknowledgement and reparation for the damage caused. But the thing is, this is the treatment that many who have tried to shed light on the facts on the ground in the occupied Palestinian territory, on the crimes committed there, have faced through and through. Journalists, civil society actors, people in academia. This silencing, this curtailing freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, the right to critique, it's something that is becoming more and more normal, less and less of an exception in Europe. And this is shocking. Now, this doesn't even take into account the fact that people like Ali Abunimah or human rights organizations, Palestinians, Israeli internationals, or special rapporteurs or the United Nations who are critical of Israel's conduct do that on the ground of international law. So let's talk about that. The occupation that Israel maintains in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. The International Court of Justice has declared that the occupation must be withdrawn as rapidly as possible, totally and unconditionally, meaning the military presence, the settlements, and the control, tangible and intangible, on Palestinian resources. So it's incredibly powerful as a decision, and which makes even stronger the commitment, on the one hand, to enforce and ensure enforcement of international humanitarian law. You know, the Geneva Conventions, the law of occupation, of which Switzerland is a depository. It is the country that hosts the ICRC, which is the guardian of the convention. So it's very weird, this sort of negligence, this lack of respect for international law. But all the more, Switzerland, as any other country, is obliged not to recognize the illegal occupation or its consequences as legal. Therefore, it needs to prove what it's doing to cut the ties with Israel. And ensuring accountability is part of the process. It's not, I understand that many states are saying, yeah, but we need to have the Court of Justice to say that, that to conclude that there is a genocide. No, it's wrong. It's wrong because the Genocide Convention imposes 3 obligations on member states to prevent genocide, to stop genocide, and to cease genocide. If it was true that we needed to wait for a decision of a tribunal, the preventive function of the convention would be lost, would evaporate. So you see, long story short, member states, particularly in the West, and Switzerland is not an exception, are finding excuses not to comply with their international law obligation.
In January this year, there was the World Economic Forum, and the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, was invited to take part. He was put on a stage. Do you think that this is what a country should be doing right now?
The Genocide Convention obliges to investigate and prosecute anyone who might have committed genocide. Therefore, when the president of Israel came into Switzerland, I was surprised that there was no attempt to investigate him because he was named in the proceedings of the International Court of Justice as having issued statements that could be genocidal.
I have this statement right here. He said, it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians not being aware, not involved. It is absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against the evil regime which took over Gaza. So usually heads of states, they have a certain immunity. Do you think that by making this genocidal statement, but also later signing a bomb, which was destined for Gaza, he failed to fulfill his moral duty as a president? And that this should actually take away the immunity? Because this is what one of the lawyers who filed one of the multiple criminal complaints has actually told me, that he normalized the killing of civilians by not making a differentiation between targets and civilians, and thus making himself complicit.
All what you said is true. For genocide in a country, you are responsible not only for actions, but also for omissions. So what has he done? What kind of powers has he used? He knew very well over 1 year and a half that war crimes and crimes against humanity were being committed against people in Gaza, and did nothing to stop it. He should have been investigated, and he should not have been received with all honors.
Switzerland cut the UNRWA money also. So they are one of the very few countries in this world that have not reinstated the money. What is the effect for the Palestinians in Gaza?
Before saying that, let me tell you why this is not in line with international law. UNRWA is a subsidiary organ of the General Assembly. If member states decide that UNRWA shouldn't exist anymore, they should discuss this at the General Assembly level. They cannot take unilateral decisions. And by doing so, not only Switzerland is betraying a tradition of support to Palestine, Palestinian refugees, and UNRWA, but also it's setting a very dangerous precedent of circumventing the obligations of UN law by pushing for unilateral measures. This is unacceptable, and it's against the law. This is first. Second, the damage that is done to the Palestinians, whose destiny remains a permanent responsibility of the international community. So you see, the international community has first partaken in the Nakba because it has agreed with the partition of Palestine, which was largely a Palestinian Muslim and Christian. And instead, half of the state already in 1947 was promised to the Jews, only 10% of whom were from Palestine. The rest were from Europe. Now, of course, there had been the Holocaust, there was pressure. No one is saying no. Also because countries were racist and didn't want to receive Jewish people from after the Holocaust. But the point is that Palestinians have paid the price for the Holocaust, which is a European responsibility. And after this, they've been denied the opportunity to return to their homes, to have a state, and even to resist the brutal occupation that Israel imposes on them. You see the hubris. Who are we? Who are we to tell the Palestinians what they can do and not do? How can we blame them when we have done nothing to help their legitimate quest for self-determination?
You kind of answered this already, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, Switzerland always says they are so neutral and they care so much about human rights and international law, But with this genocide happening in Gaza, and with the fact that they arrested Ali Abunimah, where they actually also invited, this was not directly by the Swiss state, but civilians from Switzerland invited Israeli soldiers to come here on holiday, soldiers who went to Gaza and said they want to go back to Gaza, who possibly committed crimes against humanity or crimes of genocide in Gaza, invited them to come here on holiday before they go back to Israel, possibly fighting again in Gaza. So they have really been welcoming soldiers, heads of states, while arresting Palestinians. So do you think with all of this happening, Switzerland can still call itself a neutral country?
It's no longer neutral, but the neutrality has become questionable in connection with other conflicts. Not just this one. I hope that the Swiss authorities will investigate the conduct of the Swiss government, because for me there has not been compliance with international law in the sense ensuring the cessation of any activities that could be detrimental to the Palestinians. Rather the contrary. There has been hospitality somewhat of anti-Palestinian racism. This is very serious and should be investigated.
So right now, I think what we are seeing is the international community, and especially Western countries, which always praise themselves of being democratic and caring about human rights, completely ignoring international law, completely ignoring human rights. Netanyahu is going to Poland despite an arrest warrant. Germany criminalized Israel criticism by saying it is now anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. The US wants to even sanction the ICC. What do you think about this, and why do you think international law is being ignored and even attacked?
Because we do not live in a world that is made of equal nations. International law has been a developing tool that has been used by states in different ways for different purposes, but clearly we live in a system that is not equal, and certain member states are more influential, powerful, and decisive than others, carry more weight. And therefore, it's clear that over the years, despite the decolonization process, Western states have remained more influential, and have invoked international law and compliance with international law and compliance with human rights as a way to influence domestic matters. But the West has always had this posture of moral superiority, and now it's lost because they've done nothing to implement international law for the Palestinians and others. But for the Palestinians, the double standards are incredible, are shocking. Look at what has happened in Russia, Ukraine, and in Palestine, an unlawful war, an aggression, an unlawful occupation. And in one case, in the case of Ukraine, there has been full support for the resistance, divestment, sanctions, authorized boycotts, etc. For Palestine, it's the Palestinians who get sanctioned. Western states have been the first to violate international law by crushing freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, by criminalizing solidarity, by violating the law of state responsibility, by not respecting the Apartheid Convention, the Geneva Conventions, the Genocide Convention. So their influence through this moral primacy is over.
It's the media, it's the politicians, it's very much a whole system that is supporting Israel, and they have not changed this after 1.5 years of genocide. But if you could make them, what should Switzerland do, in your opinion, and what should the people keep doing? Because we've seen a lot of support on the streets, which unfortunately does not reflect in our governments.
Citizens should not feel discouraged. It seems that nothing changes. But the human rights path is a bumpy, non-linear one, but it's a progressive one. I mean, in the second half of the last century, we still had people in zoos. So this is the progress, and the progress is also made by us, by the people. This could be the time for a peaceful revolution, for something really positive, for an international order that complies with international law. The first thing is that ordinary citizens need to take control of what they do, their choices, and their capacity to influence the public space. For example, deciding whether or not to buy into the occupation. Israel is a state that is committing international crimes. So whatever comes from Israel today might be realized to the detriment of the Palestinians. So out of a principle of precaution, there should be any buying, purchasing, any trading with Israel. There should be sanctioning of the businesses that profit from the occupation, that operate in the occupied Palestinian territory, the military sector, the research sector, the pharmaceutical sector. So there should be this mentality. There should be better protection of those like Ali Abunimah. There should be an upheaval every time public authorities touch someone who's been criminalized just or attacked or persecuted just because of defending human rights. The principle should be defend the defenders. This is not about singling out Israel. It's rather the contrary. It's about ending Israeli exceptionalism. It's about making sure that no one is above the law. And of course, keep on reminding the Swiss authorities of their obligations under international law. They must walk the talk.